When ChatGPT exploded onto the AI scene in 2022, it felt like a new age of tech transformation was dawning. Generative AI dominated public and private discourse, and neither pundits nor politicians, tech engineers, nor academics could agree whether it was a utopia or a disaster we were headed towards. Now, as we are in 2026 already, the divide has only deepened. While over 1 billion people worldwide use AI tools and enterprise investment has reached tens of billions of dollars, the anticipated leap in business value remains elusive. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Inside podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dayalani. A recent MIT report highlights that 95% of companies investing in enterprise AI see little or no measurable ROI. This illustrates the growing Gen AI divide. Few organizations unlock true value, while most struggle to justify their spend. This stark separation between a few AI winners and everyone else isn't driven by model quality or regulation, it's determined by approach. Nowhere it is more evident that in healthcare, where data fragmentation, compliance mandates, and safety critical operations are scaling Gen AI particularly complex. Let's welcome Abhijeet Vaidya, Head of Data and AI Practice at Emids, to discuss how we can tackle this Gen AI divide. Hi Abhijit, how are you doing?
Hey, hi, a very good evening to you. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Abhijit. And I'm doing good. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to have you on a podcast today. And definitely, when we talk about generative AI, there is so much to talk about it, its benefits, the risks, the challenges. But I guess we are going to touch down on a very interesting side of Gen AI today as to why there is this gap between the Gen AI investment and the actual ROI that organizations are able to achieve. So let's start our conversation, Abhijit, by telling our listeners more about Emids. So we would like to know more about the company, its specialization, and anything else you think our listeners would like to hear.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You said it rightly. I think Gen AI exploded in public imagination around 22, and when OpenAI published their models. But I think really now is a time when we can start leveraging the benefit of AI, and that's where Emids come in. Specifically in healthcare, we operate in a very specific area within healthcare, payer provider, life sciences, and health tech company. Right? These are the four areas we focus on, and we have been focused on it for last 37 plus years. So it's not something that we got bolted onto healthcare. We were born in healthcare. Emids has touched 1 in 3 lives in US as it comes to like healthcare expertise. We kind of were initially started as a company very focused on some of the core healthcare platforms like Epic, Cerner in the provider space, and Facet, HRP, QNext in the payer space. But we evolved from there to be a more of a digital engineering company, enabling improved member experiences, reducing friction in the administrative services, enabling care plans, administrating areas such as social determinants of health, how those can influence caregiving in the population, right? So we evolved into that. But I think where we have focused on the last couple of years is really how AI can enable more seamless services within healthcare, becoming an AI first services company enabled by our IP, which we are investing heavily called Paka AI, and forward deployed context engineers, people who have the context of healthcare but also understand technology. I think this is, you will hear this theme over and over again from me when we talk today. How important is in context when implementing AI? Because AI in itself is just a technology, it's an enabler. Unless you provide a context, and specifically in a heavy regulated industry like healthcare, you're not going to derive results. You're not going to drive ROI. So we'll talk more about it. But Paka AI plus forward deployed context engineer and paired with our best in class ontology, which guides this solution, right? Together that we're looking to implement for our customers. We already have some good success stories, but you will hear more about it as we go forward.
Definitely, Abhijit, and thank you for that comprehensive overview. And I'm really glad to know how the organization has built a strong niche around healthcare along with the integration of technology. And, and while you're still deeply aligned with real world business challenges. Moving ahead, Abhijit, we would also like to know more about you. You are a seasoned data and AI leader with over 2 decades of experience driving transformations at Fortune 500 companies and building high performing teams. So, how has the journey been till date? And, what triggered your interest at Emids, and what exactly is your role today at the company?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to experience working across the industry, healthcare being my recent experiences. But I have experiences across the industry, right? So, data analytics, AI is something I've been doing for 20 plus years. So, that grounds me to the reality in terms of what's possible, not possible, right? How data becomes so important when delivering outcomes with AI. Because unless you have that grounding, unless you have that understanding, a lot of times people just start working on AI without actually understanding the engine behind is going to be data, right? Unless you have the data, whether it is structured, unstructured, bringing it together, you're not going to really get the outcomes that you expect from AI. And that has really been a great enabler for me coming with that background. But just talking a little bit more about the role I play at Emids, I am leading the data and AI charter, specifically focused on building the Paka AI Foundry and solution that brings together both structured and unstructured data in the healthcare space. And it's very important to know the little bit more about how healthcare area actually a little bit differentiates from other areas, right? People always talk about saying, hey, in the retail segments, they have taken the leap in terms of technology, or in the banking financial services, the companies are so much ahead. Healthcare always lags behind. I think we need to understand a little bit more about healthcare before we actually understand why it lags behind sometimes in a technology curve. That's because healthcare deals with so much of unstructured data, right? Data about blood reports, our CT scans, our clinical notes. So much of that information is unstructured. And really, there was no elegant way earlier to harvest that information from that unstructured format to actually make a meaningful impact to patient care. But AI is really changing that. And I think that is why it's a very exciting moment where healthcare stands today. And I'm very happy to be part of that journey working with Emids. Right now, if you ask me, we are helping building out that capability in Emids. The two things I first took up when I started here was one, how can we bring AI in everything we do, right? So AI should not be like one person's or one team's or one group's priority or focus, but rather everyone in Emids, how can they scale on AI? Whether they are working on requirements, you're working on doing development, you're doing testing, you're doing implementations, you're doing operations, whatever work you may be doing in your day-to-day life, AI is going to help you. So bringing those insights, enabling the entire team to leverage AI was one of the first charters I took up, and I'm very happy the way our team are scaling up, and everybody's geared towards implementing AI in their own respective domains, because we cannot deliver outcomes is if only like one team or other team works on AI. Everyone needs to understand, they need to come on board how AI is going to really make a difference, really drive outcomes, and that's when we'll start to see the change. And we'll talk about more about this change management, because it's about knowing what works and what doesn't work. Everyone needs to understand, and that change is so important for AI to be successful. And the second thing I've been driving is implementing AI in everything, in all solutions, looking at those opportunities, and then selecting which one works and which doesn't work. So I think those have been two charters for me, making sure bringing everything in AI, and then looking at how everybody adopts AI, and then take that as my baseline to build a Paka AI platform.
Absolutely, Abhijit. And I think the way you have bridged leadership with hands on impact, whether it's driving innovation or building teams or scaling AI deployments, it really highlights the value of strong and purpose driven leadership. And I think our listeners will also really appreciate how your contributions have evolved alongside the company's growth, and adapting to new challenges while staying aligned with the core mission. Now, with that foundation set in place, while experimentation is good, without a connection to true business opportunity, I think experiments inevitably fall short. At the same time, I was just reading across this study, the Gen AI divide. It states that enterprise grade systems, both custom and vendor sold, are getting short shrift with 60% of organizations evaluating the tools, but only 20% reaching the pilot stage and just 5% making it into production. And most fail due to brittle workflows, lack of contextual learning, just like you said, and misalignment with day to day operation. So, despite the massive global investments in Gen AI, many enterprises are struggling to see the real ROI. From your perspective, why is there such a gap between the hype and outcomes?
Yeah, I think I will give a little bit color first in terms of massive global investments. And I think we all sometimes get sidetracked with investments happening with the data centers. And because that's how industry sometimes tries to project it's all AI investments. I think one aspect that we need to all understand is there's lots of investments happening in the building out capabilities to process AI or to generate outputs from LLM, or when you are asking some question to ChatGPT, how it can answer that or render a picture or things like that, right? It is actually still, I will say, at early stages in terms of investments in the real business. I think it's important for us to understand that nuance that there is a lot of investments in building the underlying infrastructure right now, whether it is like buying NVIDIA chips or building data centers and enabling that setup. I think we are starting to see a lot of investments coming in into the real enterprise world. I think it will grow. Having said that, I think there is still a lot of investment that already done, and it has not been successful. And I think you quoted early saying the study that came out when I think MIT researchers publishing 95% of AI projects remain in pilot. I think it kind of was a watershed movement for the industry, because at a similar time, I think it was Sam Altman who said, hey, there is an AI bubble, or something to that effect. He may not have said exactly those words, but kind of people interpreted that way. And then we immediately started to see the impact, right? Like there was like almost 3.5% correction in the NASDAQ AI index, which is huge, right? But I think it has stabilized. People have started to realize the meaning behind what Sam had said at that point of time. But the reality remains that the AI still is being looked at as an experimentation by many people, and they are skeptical because we have seen this movie played out before, right? There are folks who say that this is overhyped technology, often described as big data 2.0, right? Because people have seen how big data wave came, it peaked, and then it died. It has not really died, but in terms of how the industry looks at it, it's no longer the cutting edge technology, it's no longer the way. We still need big data for AI to be successful. So let's not forget about it. But amidst, we believe that generative AI and agentic AI represents a transformational breakthrough, right? The difference between hype and impact really lies in the strategy, in the domain expertise, and the ability to apply responsibility at scale. And being in an industry where all these are super important before you can start any initiative, I think puts us at the right spot. And that's where I think we are looking at industry to think through what AI, when they're implementing a use case, is it really a use case for AI? Is the business process ready for that change management to implement AI? I have also seen scenarios where people start thinking, hey, I want to implement AI. AI for what? I think sometimes we had to think about, I am not applying technology for the sake of applying technology. If I am able to solve a claim adjudication process and reduce the friction in my system by implementing an agentic AI solution, yes, I need to first think about what's the problem I'm trying to solve, then look at what solution I can bring in. Rather than saying, I have agentic AI, let me put it somewhere, right? So that's the difference people to have to ensure that AI is implemented where ROI can be delivered. I think that's an important aspect we always look at. And again, context, right? Context is what drives it. Unless you understand the context, and I'll take a simple example. You are building a care plan and you want to implement AI to build that care plan. Unless you understand how a care plan is built, what are the inputs that goes into it, you are not able to go to understand what AI agents that you are going to require to build it, what kind of documents that you need to review. When you review those documents, what are you reading in those documents for you to actually pick up that information and feed to your AI agents? So that context is very important. I'll give an example. We are right now implementing a B2B marketplace for like a startup. You can think about it, a company which is actually creating something new in the market. As you understand, like when you go for your yearly checkups or you go for any lab test or any CT scans or any of those things for your healthcare needs, and the labs like Quest or somebody, they had to actually store these results for many, many years for need of regulatory requirements. So that's an like a like burden on them to store and like preserve it. But there is actually a company which is looking at it as an opportunity. They are looking at how can I take that samples, that information, obviously obfuscated, you cannot expose any private data, and then make it available for preclinical trials. Companies can actually look at it, go to an AI marketplace and say, hey, I want to look at these samples and I want to evaluate these samples. Now, when we were building this solution, the reason I'm giving all these stories, when we were building this information, it was very easy in a sense to actually acquire that data because it's in a FHIR standard format. So it is very well defined. So you may know FHIR is a healthcare industry standard, so well established, well known. So we could acquire that data, we could store that data. But it at least comes to like actually deriving meaning out of it, right? Saying, hey, these are the clinical notes. Along with this structured information, there are clinical notes attached with each of the lab reports. If there are state results, I can pull it and show you, but there are clinical notes attached to it. I need to actually load those clinical notes with the keywords. What are the keywords in those notes? And then make those available for the user to search. Now, unless I know what to read, I have the ontology of that domain and I know what exactly I'm reading, I cannot make it available. And that's where sometimes the AI solutions are failing because they can actually engineer an AI solution. They can load the data. They can make a semantic search, a very insightful AI search available, but they don't know what to read. And that's where the context makes a difference. And ROI will be delivered when that context is brought in. You are able to deliver it at scale, and you have engineered your process so that it can change for the new process that is delivered with AI.
Definitely. And that's a really important perspective because it highlights a pattern we're seeing across enterprises globally. I think the challenge isn't a lack of ambition or investment, it's the absence of clarity around purpose, ownership, and integration. Because many organizations rush to adopt Gen AI as a capability without first defining the business problems it was meant to solve or the metrics that would define success. So,
And I
the
also, I'll just add, sorry to interrupt you, but I'll just add because I just remember this example.
Mhm.
I think sometimes when enterprises are implementing solutions, we are not seeing the entire ecosystem that we need to orchestrate. Sometimes we are looking at it as an, hey, this is the challenge I identified and I need to implement it. I have found the right solution. So I am using AI in the right way because it's the right place to use it. But how it is going to affect the entire ecosystem, because enterprises are not operating in a vacuum. There are well-established ID systems. There are well-established processes. There are business teams that have been doing this for the last 20 years. Have I anticipated and have I planned for how their life is going to change, how their day-to-day processes needs to get impacted, and how I'm going to make sure that happens? So this happened for us when we were actually implementing a complaint classification for a large hospital system, right? So hospital system, as you can imagine, get tons of complaints. It's kind of a nature of business, right? But the process they had, like they would acquire these complaints across, they had like 300 plus hospitals. So they would acquire these complaints. They would come through different data files, Excel sheets, and emails, and PDFs, and whatnot, right? So you had to gather it across all formats you have. Now, there is a process where once this information is acquired, you sort through it, you load the data. There is a maker checker where there is an analyst who looks at it and says, okay, this is a complaint or not a complaint, right? That's first thing you need to first determine, is a complaint or not complaint. And then once you determine it's a complaint, there is a certain level of categorization they have, right? 911 type of like, hey, this is a serious complaint, needs to be added immediately, flag it, make sure the process starts in terms of how can I address it, versus some of those are like more lower priority complaints. So they had like 34 categories in which they identified these complaints, aggregated them, and action on it. There was an IT system built where once that segregation happened, then somebody would trigger a workflow and then the next steps would take place. This process would take them sometimes weeks, sometimes 2 weeks to action, because They have to sort through messy data, go through different formats, categorize it. Maker checker has to look at it. So the maker has to look at it, checker has to review it. So it used to take a lot of time. They identified this as a process where AI really can help, and it really helped. So we worked on building that system, acquiring the data through different formats, implementing GenAI based classification, complaint tagging to the right categories, and so on and so forth. Right? It went through its own cycle of like UATs and like giving reviews and then fixing the process, updating the ontologies, all that. Now, the real challenge came when we put this in production and realized the system that is currently in place that triggers the workflow and the next action is to be taken. That system is something that is not been accounted for to be updated or revised, to take inputs from an AI system that's going to provide now the insights, not a human who's going to do it. So everything was done, all things were ready, but we were waiting on that downstream existing system which has to take the next step action. So all the investments, all the work that has happened is waiting right now so that the downstream system can be enabled to deliver this insight. So here is where the ROI has not happened. Work has gone in, proved it works, but if you ask the customer, this 300 hospital chain, they don't have an output or ROI from that investment, because the outcome will come when that workflow gets triggered and action happens. So I think it's important to understand the whole ecosystem, understand some business process that operates today also needs to be accounted for, all of it. I just wanted to highlight that example because
Yeah.
we don't operate in a vacuum, right? We operate in an existing ecosystem of people, processes, technologies that are there for decades.
Yeah, definitely. And that's how I think leaders can move from experimentation to a more sustained and ROI driven outcome. Also, when we talk about India specifically, I think India stands at the cusp of a new era powered by AI, where it is transforming lives and shaping the entire nation's progress as well. And I think AI is no longer limited to research labs or big corporations. It is reaching citizens at every level, whether it's improving healthcare access in remote areas or helping farmers make informed crop decisions. AI is making daily life simpler, smarter, and more connected. And as India is building this inclusive AI ecosystem, its growing global recognition reflects this progress. For example, rankings such as Stanford AI Index place India among the top 4 countries in AI skills, capabilities, and policies. So, why do you believe or think that India is uniquely positioned to become a global test bed for healthcare AI innovation?
Yeah, I think great point you made, and we are all seeing that in action. And there are some obvious reasons I think we all have been looking at, whether it is the unmatched scale and diversity, and these are some of the common points, right? Like, hey, there is a 1.4 billion population. There is so much diversity in terms of genetics, languages, disease profiles. Means when we look at it from a test bed kind of term that you coined, I mean, there is all that available in terms of the scale and diversity, right? There are initiatives that have happened that puts us in that digital highway, right? Like there is an Aadhaar that has been implemented, there is an UPI. So there are foundational capabilities. There is unmatched bandwidth, right? Digital bandwidth that's available, because we can't do this without digitization of the entire nation. So the guardrails, the underlying infrastructure has been put in place to enable this innovation, to enable this. There is also cost factor. I think sometimes people believe that because there is a cost benefit we can do it at, but I think also it's important to know it's not just about cost. I think there is immense level of talent that exists, the hunger to experiment, the hunger to make something new. I think that is what is driving a lot of this innovation. And also, I think I was talking about guardrails, right? There is guardrails being put in right now so that all this innovation can operate within a regulatory framework, operate with a lot of oversight. And because that's going to be important to make it a win-win situation for everybody. So I think these are kind of a well-known factors. So I won't deliberate more on those. But I do want to call out something sometimes is not talked about, is the level of confidence the populace has in terms of if we are able to go innovate and out-innovate than others. That level of confidence the populace carries, I think is that's going to help really make it happen. And that you can see in the startup ecosystem. That you can see that there is no fear of failure, because for innovation to succeed, you need to first remove the fear of failure, because you fail and then you succeed. And I think the what you're seeing in the Indian startup ecosystem, specifically in the healthcare space, there's a lot of innovation happening. If there's a failure, people are learning from it and then out innovating on it. So those, I think, are the factors that's going to keep on driving this innovation and keep on driving the movement forward. And we are seeing this, some of the examples, right? I was talking to one of my relatives who is a senior head of department in one of the government medical colleges. And I understood that they're already implementing AI in the care planning. There is so much of a patient population that comes in, they can't really handle it the way they are staffed today. And they are starting to take advantage of the AI based care planning. Obviously, they're not doing it without oversight, but a lot of times, regular medications, regular OPD visits, they have a standardized way. AI is able to provide them plans. So a doctor who has to spend like 30, 40 minutes sometimes can have the visit shortened to 7 or 8 minutes. So the doctor can see like 3 patients instead of 1 patient with the help of AI. And this is happening as we speak, right? So I'm very, very excited on how things are moving in India.
Definitely, that's a really compelling perspective. And India brings together scale, diversity, and real world complexity in a way very few markets can, I believe. And when we combine a massive and a varied patient population with rapid digital health adoption, we are also improving our public digital infrastructure. So, we are creating an ecosystem that's open to experimentation that makes India naturally a living laboratory for healthcare AI.
Yeah. And an innovation like examples you will see in everyday life. I recently came across an example, and I'm talking more in terms of some of the offline things I have seen or heard, right? I mean, in the villages, we always had a challenge like for some critical care, you had to travel to a nearby city and then go see a doctor, and then you would take an appointment, stay there. It's a lot of hassle for people, right? And sometimes people miss on that care because they are not able to accomplish all those steps. But now with digitization, I have seen live examples where the results are being read by AI-based systems from these lab results or some of the scans that have happened, and then they get referred to like a senior or like a specialist in a Mumbai or Delhi kind of a super specialty hospital, and they can actually comment on it or they can give their opinion online without the patient being required to travel all the way from wherever they are to the super specialties. So you really can now reach with for care even in the remote of the places without actually going to where you want to go. Because a combination of digitization and AI and enabled solutions is actually spreading out and democratizing AI within India, which is really, really amazing.
Absolutely, Abhijit. And we completely agree that Gen AI in healthcare has a lot of potential to transform care delivery. However, as with any powerful innovation, it brings with it a host of challenges that demand careful attention, from data privacy and regulatory compliance to ethical dilemmas and even public trust. What are some of the biggest risks do you think are associated when deploying Gen AI without sufficient domain grounding, especially in healthcare? And how do you think the future of Gen AI investment will look like in the coming years?
So I think healthcare by in itself is a heavily regulated industry, right? So, and which is a good thing. So people are aware, and in a way, I think it is well established or a good, I will say, a domain for AI and Gen AI to be implemented, because we know that in healthcare for a solution to be implemented, we have to pick the right solution that's going to deliver a right ROI, because I can't just experiment and say it will happen, because it will, there's a lot of burden in terms of proving this solution actually work. So we have to be careful in selecting what use case we are picking up. So it kind of drives us to select the right use case, which is going to go through that proof that we need to produce in terms of overcoming the regulation requirements. So that's kind of a mindset people have. But I think it is important when we build solutions for healthcare, we should not be just thinking in terms of, hey, I need to make sure this regulation is adhered to or that regulation is adhered to, but rather engineer a solution with an abundance of all these requirements built in, right? When you have an LLM output that produces result, you need to ensure that every output of your LLM is evaluated against established framework, whether it is GEval or DPval, or you want to implement LLM as a judge, so that not just you are looking to like bolt on the regulations from top of it on your AI solution, you start engineering it from ground up, making sure that the output right from your every single LLM is getting evaluated. Something like a CMS, responsible use of AI framework, right? Make sure that every output gets evaluated. So you can put your boundary saying, hey, I have an hallucination score more than 10. I don't want this output. I don't want AI to come back to me with an worldly knowledge and give some care plan. Unless that care plan or those insights are available in my knowledge base, is grounded in the context that I have provided it as an enterprise. I don't want AI to come up with its own recommendations. So I think it's important to implement AI the right way, engineer it from ground up to ensure that it's safe and people can trust on the output that it's producing. Because remember, AI has a larger burden in terms of making sure it operates right every time. And we can see it in other industries, right? It's not like drivers, when they are driving, they don't make mistake. Like, we have accidents happening, but an car that is driven by AI, right, whether it is one of those accidents that we have been very famously aware about, when pedestrian was overrun, I think the entire industry was kind of put on hold for almost 2 3 years. I don't know if you all remember that example. And the auto-driven cars were kind of took a back step. And I think very recently there is an example where one of the robo taxis actually went through a fire scene. It means the firefighters were actually working on a fire on a road, and the robot actually couldn't actually visualize that it was a fire, and he actually rolled through that fire. I mean, nothing was harmed. But these examples become and get highlighted so much. So I think AI has to be right every single time. We don't have the luxury of saying, okay, there can be mistakes, right? So I think engineering AI solutions ground up and then applying regulation on top of it, I think is the right way to go.
Definitely, Abhijit. And though the MIT report reveals a hard truth, most companies aren't failing because AI doesn't work. They are failing because they don't know how to make it learn. They invest in tools, not systems, in experiments, not integrations. They chase automation and not adaptation. So those on the right side of the Gen AI divide are taking a different approach. They treat AI less as a product and more as a process partner, something to be shaped, trained, and taught over time. They understand that the goal isn't to replace human intelligence, but to extend it. Well, thank you so much, Abhijit, for your time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that this Gen AI divide is not permanent, but crossing it demands fundamentally different choices about technology, partnerships, and the overall organizational design. And definitely, the divide will narrow, not because how technology is improving or scaling, but because our understanding of what to build and how it measure it finally does will also change. Thank you so much, Abhijit, for your insights. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around the Gen AI divide and gain some insights from Abhijit as to how you can be on the other side of the Gen AI divide and ensure that you are gaining measurable ROI growth with your Gen AI investments. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.